the life Jeremiah never would have chosen. Imagine being a young man expecting a quiet life in a small town, only to hear the voice of God calling you into a task that would shape the rest of your days in ways you never would have chosen. That is how the story of Jeremiah begins. Jeremiah grew up in Anathoth, a small priestly town just a few miles northeast of Jerusalem. His father, Hilkiah, was a priest, and it is very likely that Jeremiah expected to follow the same path. Life in a town like Anathoth moved at a steady and familiar rhythm. The people knew one another. Families had lived there for generations. The future often looked very much like the past. Jeremiah may have expected a life not far from that village, a quiet life serving among his people. But God had something very different in mind. One day the word of the Lord came to him, calling him to be a prophet to the nations. Jeremiah's first response was not bold confidence. It was hesitation. I do not know how to speak, for I am only a youth. Jeremiah, chapter 1, verse 6. When Jeremiah said this, he was likely a young man in his late teens or early 20s. At that age, most people are still trying to find their footing in the world. They are learning who they are and what their life might become. Now imagine being that young, and suddenly being told that you must stand before kings, priests, and an entire nation and tell them they are wrong. It is not hard to understand why Jeremiah hesitated. He was not the first servant of God to feel that way. Moses once tried to step away from the task placed before him. Jonah ran in the opposite direction when the Lord called him to Nineveh. Jeremiah stood in that same long line of reluctant servants who suddenly discovered that when God calls, the road ahead may not be the one we would have chosen for ourselves. But the Lord answered Jeremiah with words that would follow him for the rest of his life. Do not say, I am only a youth. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you to deliver you. Jeremiah chapter 1, verses 7 through 8. Jeremiah could not have known then what those words would mean. For a brief moment in his early years as a prophet, it may have looked as though the nation might return to the Lord. King Josiah had begun sweeping reforms in Judah. Idols were torn down. Pagan altars were destroyed. The book of the law had been rediscovered in the temple, and the king called the nation back to the covenant. Hope flickered that perhaps the people would truly return to God. But Jeremiah saw something troubling beneath the surface. The reforms reached the outward life of the nation, but the hearts of the people remained stubborn. Then Josiah died. The kings who followed him did not share his devotion to the Lord. The nation drifted back toward the same sins the prophets had warned about for generations. Jeremiah continued to speak, but his message was not one the people wanted to hear. I spoke to you in your prosperity, but you said, I will not listen. This has been your way from your youth, that you have not obeyed my voice. Jeremiah chapter 22, verse 21. As the years passed, Jeremiah's message grew more urgent. At first, many may have listened out of curiosity. A young prophet speaking with conviction could draw attention. But curiosity does not last long when the message confronts the heart. Jeremiah's words cut against the confidence of the nation. Judah believed the temple would protect them. They believed their history with God guaranteed their safety. They believed judgment could never truly come to Jerusalem. Jeremiah said otherwise. He warned that their outward worship meant little if their hearts remained far from the Lord. The idols might have been torn down during Josiah's reforms, but the stubbornness of the people remained. And people rarely respond kindly when someone exposes what they would rather keep hidden. Opposition began to grow. Some mocked him. Others dismissed him as a pessimist who saw danger where none existed. False prophets rose up with messages the people preferred to hear. They promised peace and security, while Jeremiah warned that judgment was approaching from the north. For Jeremiah, the tension was constant. He was not speaking to strangers. These were his own people. The streets he walked, the temple he visited, the leaders he addressed, all belonged to the nation he loved. Yet the more he spoke, the more isolated he became. One day his message angered the authorities enough that he was arrested and publicly punished. They placed him in stocks near the temple gates, a wooden device that twisted the body into an unnatural position. Anyone entering the temple could see him there. The punishment was not only painful, it was humiliating. people passed by. Some likely laughed, others shook their heads at the young prophet who kept warning that disaster was coming. The next day, they released him. But Jeremiah did not stop speaking. The pressure of those years began to wear on him. The loneliness of the task, the hostility of the people, the endless rejection, all of it pressed against his heart. At one point, Jeremiah reached the edge of his endurance. He decided he would stop. He would no longer speak in the name of the Lord. He would step away from the burden that had brought him nothing but suffering. But when he tried to hold the message inside, he discovered something he could not escape. If I say I will not mention him or speak any more in his name, there is in my heart as it were a burning fire shut up in my bones, and I am weary with holding it in, and I cannot. Jeremiah chapter 20 verse 9. Jeremiah could not walk away. The word of God burned within him. And so he continued. Years passed, kings came and went, the nation drifted further from the Lord. Jeremiah's warnings grew sharper as the shadow of Babylon slowly stretched across the land. At one point, the king himself listened to Jeremiah's words being read from a scroll that had been written down by Jeremiah's faithful scribe, Baruch. As the king heard the message, he took a knife, cut the scroll piece by piece, and threw it into the fire until the entire scroll was gone. Yet neither the king nor any of his servants who heard all these words was afraid, nor did they tear their garments. Jeremiah chapter 36 verse 24. The king believed that by burning the scroll he could silence the message, but the word of God does not disappear so easily. Jeremiah dictated the message again, and still the people refused to listen. The years of warning slowly turned into the years of fulfillment. Babylon continued to rise in power, just as Jeremiah had said it would. Their armies moved steadily across the lands to the north. Kingdom after kingdom fell before them. Still, many in Judah refused to believe that Jerusalem could suffer the same fate. The city of David, the temple of the Lord, surely God would not allow it. Jeremiah kept speaking, but by now the leaders of the nation had little patience left for him. When Babylon finally surrounded Jerusalem and the siege began, Jeremiah's message seemed even more treasonous to his people. He told them something they did not want to hear. The Lord had given the city into the hand of Babylon. Fighting against them would only bring greater destruction. To many, those words sounded like betrayal. So they seized Jeremiah and lowered him into a cistern, an empty water pit used to collect rainwater. There was no water in it now, only thick mud at the bottom. Jeremiah sank down into the mire, left there with no way to climb out. In the darkness of that pit, it must have felt as though his life was finally reaching its end. Yet even there, the Lord did not abandon him. An Ethiopian servant in the king's house named Ebed-Melech heard what had happened. With courage that few others showed, he went to the king and pleaded for Jeremiah's life. With the king's permission, he gathered several men, lowered ropes into the cistern, and carefully pulled the prophet back to safety. Jeremiah lived, but the city would not. The Babylonian army eventually broke through Jerusalem's walls. The temple was burned. The houses of the city were destroyed. The people were carried away into exile. Everything Jeremiah had spent decades warning about had come to pass. And yet something unexpected happened. The Babylonians knew who Jeremiah was. The man who had been beaten, mocked, and imprisoned by his own people was treated with surprising mercy by the conquering army. The Babylonian commander released him from his chains and gave him a choice. Jeremiah could go to Babylon and be cared for, or he could remain in the land. The prophet who had spent his life warning Judah now stood free among the ruins of the city he loved. Jeremiah had been right, but being right did not make the moment easier. The smoke rising from the city was not a victory to him. It was a heartbreak. The temple where generations had worshiped the Lord lay in ashes. The streets where families once lived were silent. Jeremiah stood among the ruins of everything he had tried to save. And yet, somewhere in the middle of that devastation, Jeremiah wrote words that still echo through the centuries. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Lamentations chapter 3 verses 22 through 23. The man who had seen judgment more clearly than anyone else still recognized the mercy of God. Jeremiah's life teaches us something that is not always easy to see while we are living through our own difficult seasons. Faithfulness to God does not always lead us down the roads we would have chosen for ourselves. Sometimes it leads through rejection. Sometimes it leads through loneliness. Sometimes it leads through moments where it feels as though the world around us is collapsing. Jeremiah knew those roads well, but he also discovered something many of us spend a lifetime learning. Even when our circumstances look like ruins, the faithfulness of God is still standing. When the young man from Anathoth first heard the voice of the Lord, he could not have imagined the life that lay ahead of him. He could not have known the beatings, the prison cells, the accusations, or the lonely years of speaking a message few wanted to hear. Yet somewhere along that long road, Jeremiah learned to trust something greater than his circumstances. The mercy of the Lord had not failed, and it never will. I know, O Lord, that the way of man is not in himself, that it is not in man who walks to direct his steps. Correct me, O Lord, but in justice, not in your anger, lest you bring me to nothing. Jeremiah chapter 10, verses 23 through 24. As you sit with Jeremiah's story today, consider the paths God has placed before you. There may be moments when the road feels difficult or uncertain. There may be seasons when faithfulness seems costly. But Jeremiah's life reminds us that the Lord who calls us is also the Lord who walks with us. And even when our eyes see only the ruins around us, His mercies are still new every morning. Share your reflections or questions in the comments so we can learn and walk this journey together.